Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you joining us, depending on where you are tuning in from around the world. Welcome to this Africa Frontiers of Innovation session, courtesy of Canon EMEA. My name is Victoria Rubadiri. I'm a broadcast journalist based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm really excited about today's session because it's something that's very close to my heart, and I believe to a lot of you who are watching today, and that's music and the sound of the future. COVID-19 really was the disruption heard and felt around the world. And with respect to music, it hit hard on the concerts and live performances, of course, after social gatherings were banned, and that was literally across the globe. But for Africa, how did that play out? Pun intended. Well, we know that live performance revenues were the biggest casualty when it came to COVID-19. In fact, according to Billboard, since April 1st, 2020, Live Nation in Nigeria lost over $30 million in revenue, and that was due to the COVID-19 restrict was the way to go. But with that also came questions on how countries across the globe responded. And of course, countries across Africa responded. Spending was like the adoption of smartphones and affordability of mobile data, digital services, marketing capabilities, and the pricing of digital services, as well as competition from physical and digital piracy. Now, in this session, we'll look at how COVID-19 has accelerated digitalization and innovation, and what we can expect for the future in the music industry. I'd like to introduce my esteemed panel of experts, beginning with Natasha Stambuli, and she is the Boomplay Music Tanzania's general manager. Great to have you, Natasha. So excited for this discussion.
Thank you.
Well, we're also having on board Malak El Husseini. Malak El Husseini is an Egyptian singer, songwriter, and artist. And last but not least, we also expect Philip Tuju, who is a Kenyan music producer, singer, director, founder of Red Fourth Academy of Music, and a music trainer. He'll be joining us shortly, hopefully, if the internet agrees, but we will continue on with the conversation. You know, it's the day and age we're in now. Everything has gone virtual, so we are literally left at the mercies of the internet. Ladies, welcome to the panel. Let's begin the discussion. In your view, when you look at how various countries across Africa responded to the pandemic, and musicians especially, what kind of solutions were implemented? Did they work? Malak, let me begin with you, because it's quite interesting. You actually were in the process of launching an album when the pandemic hit.
So it's crazy how you put it. Just hearing you say all these numbers and just putting everything into perspective, like now we've gotten used to everything that's been happening like a year later, but then it was crazy. Like I was supposed to release an album that March, and that album actually got postponed until now. I've still not released it. I'm supposed to release it next month, hopefully. But ever since then, there's been challenge after challenge, whether that's to shoot visuals like videos for the music, or to perform this music live, or to just like this simple things that we've taken for granted in our lives. Everything has been super difficult, but with that came a lot of opportunity as well. We found ourselves as artists like collaborating with so many people across the globe, not just in Egypt or in Africa. So I found myself collaborating with artists I would have never thought I'd be able to collaborate with, just because I never got I never actually like thought that I could do that. until COVID happened, and just like the geographical boundaries have completely uh, disappeared, you know. So um, having been through all these challenges with the live concerts, with the recording studios being closed, um, social distancing, and all of that, we've also come a lot closer to other artists, and we found a way to create our art form by collaborating with different artists. So in my case, for example, I've, instead of maybe just shooting a normal video, I'd do like collaborations with 3D visual artists and bring these songs to life. Or we would go live from our studios and just connect with people. Obviously, it's not the same, but it's a start, and we found a lot of opportunity in the challenges.
No, the beauty of the creative mind, you have to be innovative, right? And it's amazing to see that out of those challenges, you were able to create some amazing collaborations, which we'll talk about a bit later on in the discussion. But Natasha, let me bring you in here. When you look from where you sit in East Africa, Tanzania, you know, the pandemic hits, artists now are forced to really heavily rely on the internet, on online streaming services, which had been there. They had been there, but of course now a lot more people were heading there to connect with their favorite artists and favorite songs. So in your case with Boomplay, what did you find was a change in some of the solutions that you employed to help artists connect with their audience?
Okay, so basically, as you all know, we're still catching up, especially in East Africa, when it comes to digitalization, not just consumers, but also artists understanding the value of having streaming services and what that means for their income, and just you know, penetrating other borders. But we've seen that this was a wake-up call for a lot of artists. In terms of just creativity and as well as having plans. You know, I've seen that a lot of artists, especially in East Africa, we're very creative, but we don't have enough plans in terms of how, like strategies on how to promote your content. But now we've seen that now they actually have had time to be like, okay, I don't only have one source of income, which was mostly, you know, offline kind of activities, but now they're exploring more in terms of like asking for help and advice in terms of how do we go about, you know, selling our content in a more global element as opposed to just depending on just one region to actually have more access to royalties and, you know, survival mode. But we've seen that this was a blessing in disguise, I would say, for some, in terms of like how Malik said, you actually discover so many things that you didn't think you're capable of in terms of, you know, collaborating with other artists across board, and also how to get your royalties coming in and having the creative element of, you know, expanding your knowledge, but also expanding your creativity.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right in the fact that it was a wake-up call for a lot of musicians. You know, I saw a lot of them say, great, it gave us an opportunity to connect a lot more online, but you just can't get away from the fact that it hit us in the pocket and it hit hard. You know, when we're talking about the financial drain that this pandemic has been on a lot of artists, you know, just give us a picture of what that actually looks like for many of them. And that's for you, Natasha. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, you know, a lot of artists, as you say, they were very dependent on, especially in Tanzania, on live concerts, you know, brands sponsoring them on offline activities. And again, as I said, digitalization is still something that is on progression. We're still trying to catch up with the world. So we were depending on, you know, peer-to-peer kind of in terms of like monetization, but now you are just forced into one element whereby it's just digitalization. And how does that translate in terms of like, are there enough users streaming? Are there enough people in digital that can actually put in the, stream more so that they can get more money? And we've seen that, it has been a struggle, but it has also worked in our favor in terms of like streaming apps, whereby now they understand the value of this streaming apps, and they understand in terms of like monetary, and actually even in terms of what they do with their money, in terms of like, okay, so this is the amount that I've gotten for this season. What should I do in terms of like music videos, and obviously daily to daily activities, and in terms of like user base too, in a sense, like now they understand that there's an element of supporting more artists online digitally, and shying away from piracy, because these are things that a lot of artists might, depending on working towards getting their daily bread. And the piracy element also is it's like a block, whereby, you have to understand, if you're supporting your artist, then pay for what they're giving you.
Absolutely. And I can only imagine the headache piracy is on artists, especially when it comes to intellectual property. Malak, let's talk about how, the music industry has evolved and changed in recent years with respect to digitalization. Online streaming services and apps have just become big. And you're kind of seeing artists having to pivot and adjust to this new form and this new platform of connecting with their audience, marketing their music, for instance. Malak, when trying to adjust to an online platform and trying to find new revenue streams, for instance, how did that work for you?
Yeah. So I've actually related a lot to most of the things Natasha said. I want to add to that. She said something that completely resonated, which is going from having like one or two main income streams into diversifying how you monetize your art, your music. So for example, a lot of my musician friends went to platforms like not only releasing more music, obviously, to get more royalties in, but also going to platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, SoundBetter, and offering their music services. Obviously, I'm not talking about them as artists specifically, but like offering services like songwriting, music production, recording, voiceovers, and all of that. They kind of utilize their studios a lot more. They've utilized their talents, and they've found different ways to make an income online. And also through their own music on maybe Twitch or other streaming platforms, live streaming platforms, where they can like hold online performances and all of that. But I've also seen artists develop merch and do so many cool things just to like diversify how they get their income, and it's amazing. It's amazing, really.
Really interesting. So, on sites where they're selling their skills, if you will, for like songwriting and whatnot, and then going into merchandise as well, is quite interesting to see artists move in that way. I want to kind of get your take on this also in terms of how music is promoted. You moved from the days of where radio play was a big deal. You heard your song on the radio and you almost exploded, to DJs pushing your song, music videos. MTV was a big deal. And now we're seeing a change and a shift, almost, if you will. Artists now kind of relying on TikTokers to push their music and their songs with popular dances. How is that changing the industry and how people interact with music now? I'll start with you, Malak, and then come to you, Natasha.
It's crazy because you find so many TikTok musicians coming up, actually. It's like a world of its own now. TikTok and like Instagram reels, and making music for like to create trends and challenges and all of that. It's amazing. It's amazing what can come out of survival mode, as Natasha said. You find so many creative ways to create your music and promote it. I think the shift has been happening for a while, even before COVID. The most important thing right now is to get on playlists. to get your songs on playlists and to get your songs played on the most influential TikTokers pages and all of that. So yeah, I think we've focused more on that. So I believe that I'm someone who an artist who focuses a lot on promoting their music, or I kind of have a knick-knack for marketing. But a lot of my friends who only focus on the music, I found them start to ask, what can I do to have my song played or playlisted here or pushed here and there? And it's just asking these questions is really like a step forward.
Absolutely. Natasha.
I think in terms of like, the industry was moving very fast, but it also allowed everything to just kind of like take a step back and appreciate good music, appreciate what a lot of artists are putting out there. So we've seen the verses, for example, which was a big deal. We've seen around the world whereby the verses was quite a very creative element whereby we actually, some of us were in nostalgia whereby, you see Brandy and Monica doing the verses and you're like, okay, certain, not just, we, at some point it was like new music, new music, new music, new music. But then we've also figured out that now there's also an element of just appreciating what other, artists have produced before or they've done before. And you're like, oh, wow, this is good. So there's an element of the shift is great, but also I think even with artists themselves, and even users, the consumers are more appreciative of what the creative industry is doing because, being stuck in a house for months, you need something that keeps you going. And most of the people have really survived on music, like because certain music speaks to them and their lifestyle and what they're going through at the moment. So there's that element of, taking a breather, but appreciating the whole ecosystem in the entertainment industry and, seeing virtual concerts and, cheering from your bedside, cheering from your living room. So, I mean, as the world is changing in terms of like COVID, and even in Africa, we can see that there's an element of pause, but not really pause, meaning that nothing is being done, but it's just more of appreciation with what everybody is putting into other people's lives, especially in the music industry.
And Malak, when you look at the different revenue streams that several artists have had to kind of get into, you almost described a scenario of being a jack of all trades, literally, to survive. What would you say is the biggest moneymaker? I was speaking to an industry player who said, at this point, because music really has become a commercial product, endorsements are huge for many artists. Is that something that you would agree with? Or what is the biggest moneymaker right now for many artists?
I would say it depends on the type of artist. So, like for example, solo artists like me, for example, we get more endorsements than maybe like bands or just people who are not more active on social media. So it's kind of, it depends on what you do and your positioning and your branding and all of that. But for sure, brand endorsements for me have been huge during this time. I've worked with many brands, and but for most musicians, it's the live concerts. That's their where they get their income. So unfortunately, it hasn't been fair game during COVID. But yeah, I think more artists are now pushing their music online for that reason in itself.
It's interesting you bring up the whole issue of online. And Natasha, let me bring you in here because I read somewhere that one of the more interesting music trends that we've kind of noticed is recently 5 of the top 10 artists in terms of Twitter growth last year, 2020, were Nigerian artists with millions of Boomplay streams. So kind of making that correlation between the streaming app and then, of course, engagement online. Have you kind of noticed that trend, and how do you explain that correlation?
I mean, as a streaming app, obviously we try to sit with artists and see different strategies on what works for us and what they can get from the app that can actually push their content. As I always say, like, we're like a supermarket whereby, you know, you come and sell your goods, but then the person that actually has a strategy and on selling how their content is will probably get the most. So we've seen that Nigerian artists have really pushed the envelope to actually see more streams because they also understand how the streaming business works. And I think this is an element whereby there's an importance of education, not just for consumers to tell them, do this, stream this, but there has to be a connect between, do artists themselves understand how to use the app, or what does the app bring on their table that they can use and get the most out of it. So we've seen that most countries are picking up better than others, but there's more artists willing to learn and apply that education to reaching out their audiences even more and at a broader scale.
I'm glad you mentioned the whole issue of educating artists on how to navigate that space, because oftentimes you'll find there's a mismatch between the value that these platforms derive from the content available to them, and then the revenue that gets back to the creators and the artists. You know, how do we kind of close that value gap, if you will? Because it seems to be a pretty challenge in the industry.
So you broke at the end of your question. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, my apologies. So how do you connect the issue of a lot of those platforms, yours, for instance, Boomplay or Spotify, deriving a lot of value from the content that's put on their platform, but the trickle down doesn't necessarily make its way to the artists and the creators, and trying to close that value gap, if you will, for artists? That seems to be a pretty big challenge.
I think, again, I think the educational element of things, and I could speak for example, in Tanzania, what I've noticed is artists end up becoming jack of all trades, as you put it, whereby there's no a business element of things. That, you know, you have content, which means that it's, you know, you can put it out, people are streaming, or it's out there in the streets, it's huge, a song is huge, but there's no focus on, this is business, how do I make the most out of this so that I can pocket the money? And one of the things that there's a breakdown that I've noticed from the time that I've been working is having proper managers. You know, artists can lose so much, you know, they are out there thinking about their creativity, putting their hearts out, but having that element of, we don't have enough managers that understand, excuse me, understand the music industry in a way that even us as an app, when we speak to them, they understand the value of what we're bringing on the table and what more can they do to get more out of deals, for example. So I think, again, there's an element of education, getting better managers and focusing on what works for you, but in a smart way. Because when you look at West Africa, for example, slowly they're picking up in terms of, like, they're not just creative, they're looking at various elements of, you know, economical element, you know, so having the proper managers, having the business sense of the industry is also quite important to just bridge that gap so that we can get the best out of both. Because even with us, if you understand it better, we know how to sell it better. It makes our work even more easier. So yeah, basically that's just that a few.
Let me bring in Malak on that note. But Malak, you're now the person we're talking about. You're the artist, right? And as much as, you know, you want your sole responsibility to be the content creator, I'm the artist here, and leave the contracts and the terms and conditions to my team, it's also
Mm.
really prudent to know what's going on, you know, and especially now when you're
Yeah.
thinking about how music across the continent is becoming that much more globally prominent, right? And so
Mm.
you'll be having offers and deals coming your way. What would you say needs to happen for many artists in that area of education, for instance, that Natasha was talking about?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be speaking about Egypt right now. I think in Egypt we have so many talented artists, like an incredible amount of talent, and very, very little number of managers. And we don't have many independent labels. We don't have this like this professional industry. So we have so many artists, we have very, very few managers, very few labels. And the labels that we have are mostly for the like extremely commercial pop Egyptian artists. So there is a huge gap between like up and coming rappers and singers and just this industry as a whole, and then the pop commercial artists in the region. Um, so I found that a lot of artists want to just focus on their music. So even if they try to manage themselves, it's really draining for, I think, for an artist to just make the music, write the songs, be as vulnerable as they can be in their creativity, and then manage themselves as well. Like no one wants to go and like sell themselves to someone, you know what I mean? So I think it's really, really important to find these individuals, and if artists found these individuals, I think their career would take a whole different turn. I'm in the process of finding a new manager as well. And no, it's been really, really hectic. I've been looking for a manager for like a year now. And even when we find managers here in the region, because the industry is so new and because it hasn't been around for years and years and years, especially in the Africa region, um, we find that they're good at like making the business deals and all of that, but they don't necessarily understand the musical process and what the artist needs. So the artist would be like fulfilled in a business sense, but then when we need someone to strategize for our music, for example, and our releases and how to push the songs and all of that, there's a gap there. So I think that's still to be I don't know. It's still a challenge for most of us. Yeah.
Certainly, and you never know, there could be a manager watching this conversation right now and you could get an offer. You don't know how these things work,
It's just
but
like
I want to
finding the right person.
that's true. That's true. This could turn into a matchmaking service for managers and musicians. That's on a light note. But let's segue into just how this industry is going to be reimagined and revisioned, if you will, because of the pandemic, and just how much of the measures that have been put in place will stick, will be with us for a while. And basically how artists maybe are trying to reconfigure their marketing strategies, even in terms of how they write their music as well and put it out there. Natasha, what are you seeing in the East African region with many artists there? Are they having to, as you said, respond to this wake-up call in a very different way and looking to the future?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We've seen that a lot of artists now are more woke, for lack of a better word. However, they also need help in terms of like just having proper laws put in place so that they can protect their songs, the way their royalties are put out, copyright issues. So we've seen that now they're also learning a lot about their protection in terms of their content and we've seen that there's a bit of like a wake-up call with the government too, understanding that, artists, content creators also need a good foundation, so getting all this, because you can, I never ever understand how you could be so famous and then you're still broke, so how do we protect them so that they have a great foundation to actually top it up with their creativity, and seeing that, now that the digital world is coming to play, we have Boomplay who that is amazing. And we're here actually in the country, and they can just walk in our office anytime and we can help them with so many things. But now we can even communicate through phones and Zoom, and just seeing that, there's like the internet penetration in the country is also growing at a massive pace. We're looking at around 27 million internet penetration right now in Tanzania. So, and the data in Tanzania is a bit more cheaper compared to other, areas. So there's an element of them using what resources that they have to work in their favor. And just, you can be creative, but understanding also what resources you have to actually put your content out there and get what you need out of it. And that also, again, it's also having the right laws in place so that, they're protected and they understand that, if their song is not just played online, but also played on radio, are they getting, the money that they deserve? But we've seen there's a wake-up call right now in terms of like them understanding that, okay, if they were taking us for granted, now they're like, okay, this makes sense now. It's better. So I do definitely look forward to having greater steps and seeing a lot of artists thrive in the midst of this pandemic.
Certainly. And Malak, Natasha just mentioned how data is a lot more affordable in Tanzania. However, that's just not the case across the continent. Data is still quite expensive in many African countries. In fact, South Africa is in the top 10 most expensive countries for data globally. I don't know what the case is in Egypt and how that affects, the audience connecting with content online and streaming services as well in your country.
I think it's pretty cheap in Egypt. Like even in the most rural areas, you'd find like people with like 3 phones and just watching content and downloading music and all of that. So that's in our favor.
I want to move to just what's missing in the music market, and talked about the issue of managers and understanding contracts and how they, are needed in that space. Let's talk about piracy and protecting intellectual property. I know there's such a huge gap there because even the regulatory atmosphere is not as robust to ensure that artists and their work is protected in Egypt. Malak, what's the scenario there?
We don't really have like performance rights organizations or any of that. We don't. And like if I make like a song for a movie maybe or a show or something, I don't get any back end from that. So there's no like system or structure to make sure that me as an artist gets back the royalties. But it's slowly changing with like streaming services. So when I distribute my music, I distribute it through either CD Baby or DistroKid or whatever, and I'm able then to get my royalties. But there's nothing in the country itself giving me my royalties. You know what I mean? So if I do anything local, I would like I'd receive like a one-time fee, but I wouldn't get like just royalties.
Right. So the recurring payments.
We definitely need that for sure. Yeah.
Natasha, what's the case in Tanzania and the region as well? And what are the implications of not having such structures for artists?
I think it's getting better because now there was a gap in between, artists themselves and the regulatory systems put in place. I think there was a communication mishap there. And with now having, for example, with now that African music is really getting the attention that it needs, there's more awakening in terms of like artists and the government understanding that, you know, this is also something that they can also get income from, you know. So they've been working together. I believe that as I've been talking to both ends, and they've been trying to work together to just eliminate that communication gap and building a trust whereby they can trust the regulatory systems to do their job, and also more artists actually seeking and going to actually understand that, okay, we can trust you enough to actually have our best interests. So there's an effort that is being done on both sides to actually fill that gap, whereby at some point everybody was trying to do their own thing, but then there is actually a system that was put in place, but were they really doing their jobs, you know, in that element? So it's getting better, and I think it will get even more better as more people are coming, speaking up, and the government now is more aware, and they're giving them the support that eventually they will need to move further. And, you know, having like a streaming service, a Pan-African music streaming service in the country too, also puts it in a way that there's actually more economical sense for the country too, to actually have all these things put in place properly. But it's in progress, and we hope everything will progress quicker so that we can have a better synergy in the industry as a whole.
And I wonder how, Natasha, you know, a platform like Boomplay is really trying to scale what it's doing. I know it has millions of subscribers across sub-Saharan Africa, which is incredible. When you're looking at bigger players like Spotify, Apple Music, which I think only recently Apple Music started opening up to various African countries, Boomplay does have an advantage in that it's home ground. You're playing on a home field, if you will. How are you trying to reach more subscribers and also attract more artists to see the benefit of a platform like Boomplay?
I mean, as we say, the streaming apps have been there for years. We just stepped in recently, but in our core element is we wanna celebrate African music into the world, but we don't discriminate just African music, because we partnered with the likes of labels like Universal, Warner, and so forth. But one of the things that we can say we have an advantage of is, yes, we do have offices in certain areas, not all areas. We have offices in Kenya, we have offices in Ghana, Nigeria, and Tanzania, and hopefully we will continue expanding. And this is an element because as Africans, we tend to trust more when we see you as opposed to just us emailing. There's that trust element where if you're there, then I can trust that you have the best interest and we can talk more. And again, you know, we shouldn't forget that even artists themselves, they're not all tech savvy. There's some who still are struggling with, you know, uploading their content, signing contracts and actually sending them back. And again, as we said, we don't have enough, in Tanzania, we don't have enough like distributors, like content distributors. So there's also that gap. So I think we're at the right place at the right time, and we have the best interest at heart because we want to see artists flourish. And we've seen that there's more artists coming up right now. You know, at some point it was almost like just a minority. We just have like one artist who represents the country all the time. But now we've seen that there's more artists actually fighting their way out. And the good thing about Boomplay also is the fact that we're not we're trying to also have that intercontinental thing going on, whereby, artists from Kenya can collaborate with artists from South Africa, or artists from, because we already have those connections, it's easier for us to be the middleman in terms of like helping them get what they need faster. And also at the same time, we're, as you said, we have millions of users, but how do you penetrate to those millions of users as an artist? Again, playlisting, collaborations that are put into play, and just giving them more than what we just are. So we really, really try to be there and help them, even sometimes as much as even planning, helping them to plan, like, okay, so you have a song, how can we help you tap into other countries or other user base, because you can only do so much with your user base. Yeah, so I think I wouldn't say I'm not worried, but I think we're at the right place at the right time.
Certainly, and according to Billboard, Africa's the new music frontier, and looking forward, that's exciting to hear. Malak, when you look at the future as an artist, how do you feel we could elevate the African sound, African music? Now the world is turning towards the continent, and I can say we have the talent, we have the music and the songwriting quality, great music videos, but how do we now further elevate that sound and ensure that the world is paying attention and that artists are getting their dues? Really important.
So more recently, there's a huge movement of like rap and trap music in Egypt and Middle East in general, North Africa. It's crazy. Like, you would find a different rapper getting so famous like every single week. I swear to God. And their views are off the charts. You'd find millions and millions and millions of views on independent artists and rappers. That's amazing. I think there's so much more competition now that it's helping artists create more frequent content and better quality content. So videos, for example, right now are incredible, and they're all independent artists without, maybe they'd have management, but without like a label backing them up. So everyone is just like doing what they can with what they have, but the standards are so high right now. You can't just be an artist and just release music. You have to make amazing videos, you have to make great content and always be relevant. And so I love this this environment that's been created more recently. I think we're on the way to just like putting ourselves on the map. 100%. We already are right now, and especially this past year has been incredible. In terms of getting their dues, I really would hope to see someone doing something to just put like structure and just put a system in place. In Egypt currently, I don't know that this is being implemented, but I really hope that the right people would see that there needs to be a system in place and implement that.
Absolutely. And Natasha, I was having a conversation with someone in the music industry, and they said, I really hope and wish, as much as we're getting a lot of attention from the rest of the world, that we can move from the international category in these award shows to mainstream and actually really be appreciated and put at par with many of these other well-known artists. How do you think that can be done?
We continue doing what we do best, and make great music that resonates with us. What I've noticed is that, and I appreciate, is that I've seen a lot of African artists not trying to be somebody else. So they're trying to be great where they're at, in terms of like the content that they push out. It speaks about them. And this is why I was even thinking the other day, and I'm like, you know, nobody's trying to, you know, there's like 20,000 Beyoncés probably in the US, you know, so you're not trying to be the next Beyonce. Just be who you are, great at where you're at. And the reason that I think a lot of, like, for example, Afrobeat blew up is because it was a new sound that the world didn't know about, but now it's catching fire and people are appreciating it more and more. So I think we just need to continue pushing what we are and continue making great strides in our music, and the world will eventually understand, and they will eventually curve into what we deserve. I mean, music is music. You can't say international. What is international, you know? So I think the categories need to change and just appreciate music as music. You know, as an artist, you're an artist for a reason. I mean, again, yes, there's OGs that have been in the game that we, you know, we'll give them their flowers. But in terms of categorizing them, eventually, you know, also artists also need to also understand at the same time that, you know, you're being given flowers as to what you push. Nobody owes you anything. So it's just us continuing doing the best we can at where we are at, and the world will succumb to us eventually.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm just thinking about what Malak had said. You can't just be good as an artist. You have to be amazing. And part of that amazingness, if you will, comes through the production quality, right? And the resources that are needed to help push and elevate the quality of whatever it is the consumer is watching, if it's a music video, or listening to, right? So Malak, from your perspective as an artist, what actually goes into putting that product out there, putting that excellence out there, you know, in terms of equipment, in terms of teams, you know, and how can artists collaborate with bigger players in the tech industry, those who are producing cameras, for instance? What kind of collaborations can be put out there to ensure that the quality is elevated?
So we've recently discovered that we can do anything at our home studios. So there was always a myth of you have to go to like a very expensive studio to record. You have to work with the best producers. You have to record in like a recording booth. And every single day there's new equipment, new products offered in the market to make your space suitable for all the things that you want to make musically. So instead of like paying a ton for a producer to work on your music, you learn how to produce it yourself. And there's like a keyboard that can act as a keyboard and a violin and the possibilities are endless. They're really endless in terms of production. You can make a hit song in your bedroom right now, and you can record it in your bedroom. You can learn techniques to mix. You can learn recording techniques and make your space work for you. And I think with the pandemic and staying at home most of the time, I think we've all converted our bedrooms into music studios. And just putting out music has never been easier, and making music has never been easier. In terms of collaborations, I think the internet has opened up so many doors for us as artists. And I've actually, in my latest music video, I've collaborated with an American choreographer who ended up dancing with The Weeknd in the Super Bowl. And I was like shocked at that, and I was like, I can't believe I got to collaborate with that person. And all I did was just message them. That's basically all I did. And I was like, I'm sure they're not going to answer me, but oh well, let's try. And I tried, and they ended up collaborating with me on the music video. And there's just so many possibilities. And I guess the thing I would want to tell artists right now is don't be afraid to ask. I feel like a lot of artists are very we have egos, and we're divas sometimes. We're very like self-conscious about our image and all of that. But I want to remind artists that it's okay to ask, and it's okay to collaborate, and you'd be surprised at who would agree and who would love to help you out on your journey.
Indeed, drop the pride and get some help. I want to also put a question out to those watching. If you have any comments, questions, please hop on the comment section in Facebook, LinkedIn. Just before we wrap up, we want to hear from you. If there's any questions for Malak or for Natasha, we want to hear from you just before we wrap up the discussion. Natasha, Malak talked about, converting a bedroom into a studio. That brings a new meaning to working from home, which we now know very, very well. But when you're looking at some of the resources that are needed on the continent for artists, you're going up against heavyweights who've spent millions of dollars on equipment. What are some of the gaps that you're seeing, and what's needed in terms of resources in that area of production?
I think as artists, with what they go through, and as Malak said, for her, it might be easier. For some of our artists in East Africa, can be a bit difficult because, again, most artists depend on studios, to put out content. And they're just now understanding how to get more monetary funding and using that to their advantage, So it's still very young, and we've noticed that some artists actually even reach out to creators or producers or the people that actually produce their songs from outside the country because of what is needed right now, the quality of what is needed to actually be heavyweights around the world. So this is something that is still being worked on, I can say, in my region. And we're seeing more people investing in equipments that sometimes are actually quite expensive, for some. So maybe I'm actually having investors from abroad or investors within the country that can actually invest in a good studio that people can use. And if not, having songs that you can produce at home, it's great. But then at some point, if you can send it through, digitalization again, you can send it via email and voila, Zoom, and you have a song created intercontinental or within the country with whoever that you feel comfortable with that can produce the result that you need. So again, I think with digitalization, in terms of just creating content, in terms of reaching out to the right people and having the right content, has made it easier. And I think this is something that most artists now are taking note of because, again, as you said, physically being there is actually a challenge. So understanding if you don't have the equipment at home, what other measures do you take to make sure that your content is being produced the way it's produced, with maybe taking measurements. So if you're gonna do physically, you're gonna meet with the producers and so forth physically. What are the measures that you will take to protect yourself in this pandemic? So, things can be done, creativity can be done again, and digitalization has made it easier. And I hope, more content comes out.
Certainly. And, as we wrap up, again, request for questions, comments for any of you joining us on the discussion, LinkedIn and Facebook. We want to make this as interactive as possible. But, yes, we want good content coming out. Malak, what's your hope for, music on the continent? Where do you want to see it go? And of course, we've seen how the internet continues to break down physical and cultural boundaries, and seeing some beautiful collaborations between different artists from different parts of the continent. But what's your hope, as we move forward? We were hit hard last year. but what gives you hope and excitement about, the years ahead?
I'm excited for live concerts to come back 100%. Festivals, venues opening back up. A lot of venues in my country and across the African region are slowly like closing up because of us staying at home. And I think for music to be felt and having this transaction between artist and audience, it really has to be live and it has to be face to face. Sure, playing in front of a screen is also a tool to get your music to your audience, but it doesn't beat any live performance at the end of the day. This interaction, this inspiration that comes after any live concert or just seeing your favorite artist perform live is something that can never be replicated digitally. And I'm really excited for all of this to be over and finding new ways to come back to the live scene. And I've even seen like festivals and concerts happening where like you go inside like a plastic ball or whatever. There are so many creative ways venues and concerts are approaching having an audience there with safe distancing. So I really hope we come back to life.
I totally agree with you there. I had the privilege of being in the stadium when Beyonce did her first performance in Africa, in South Africa, and it was a transcendent experience. And you're right, because you have to be in the space to feel the music. It's an experience. Natasha, I'll give the last words to you. Just in terms of what gives you hope, you're on the other side, you play host to many of the brilliant artists across the continent. What do you hope for Boomplay, and what do you hope for the industry at large?
I'm hoping for the best, obviously. I'm hoping that more of African music is celebrated and more artists are putting out their best foot forward. And what is interesting is that I can see that now artists have experienced best of both worlds, the offline, the online. They were used with a certain lifestyle. Now they were forced into moving to a certain lifestyle. So hopefully when everything goes back to norm, they have best of both worlds and they can utilize all their learnings to actually be the best of the best and actually entertain us as music lovers. And we can appreciate them even more right now because now we understand more of their struggles and what goes behind the scenes. And I'm hoping that with Boomplay being there, they can utilize the platform even more to get more out of it. So don't sleep on opportunities that are presented to you. And I think in Africa, the way we've positioned ourselves is something that not just artists, but also users can easily get access to on their phones and desktops. So I think where we are going is, it might be a bit hard at some point, but I'm very positive that Africa is the next stop when it comes to entertainment. And I'm hoping that we show what we are about and we let the world celebrate us in the deserving way that we deserve. So I'm really excited with what the future is holding, and the digitalization, obviously now it's catching pace. So yeah, it's exciting times ahead. Can only hope for the best,
Indeed, exciting times ahead. Thank you so much, Natasha and Malak, for your time. Unfortunately, Philip Tuju wasn't able to join us for this session, but all the same, a wonderful, great discussion and giving us great insights into what's going on in the industry, some of the challenges that were occasioned because of COVID-19, but how the innovation and creativity of artists help them rise above it all. And the hope that we have in an industry that is growing and, as Billboard said, is the next frontier when it comes to music around the world. Really excited to see what comes out of the brilliant artists across this continent. And just a suggestion to those of you watching us and listening, for some appreciation, go head over to your favorite African artists, listen to their music, share it as well, as we celebrate the beauty of music in our lives and on this continent. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with us till the end. And of course, keep your eyes right here on the LinkedIn Canon EMEA LinkedIn page and the Canon CNA Facebook page for more updates on the next discussion of Africa Frontiers of Innovation. Thank you once more. My name is Victoria Rubadiri. It's been amazing being your host for this session, and we will see you again next month. Bye.